I had this whole weekend planned. I was going to step away from the screen, catch up on life, maybe touch some grass for once. And then at 11 p.m. last night, I started seeing the reports. China didn't just hint. China didn't just threaten. China moved. And what they did is going to reshape the global silver market in a way that most people won't understand until it's already too late. So I'm recording this Sunday morning, February 20th, 2026, Los Angeles time, because this can't wait. Comment what day and date you're watching from, because the timeline on this matters and I want to know how far this information travels. And real quick, if you value breakdowns that connect the dots before the mainstream media figures it out, do me a favor, subscribe and comment FinTalk OG so the algorithm knows you're here for the serious work. Now, here's what happened, and I'm going to keep this factual before we get into what it means. According to recent reporting and policy updates circulating in commodity circles and based on official government announcements from Beijing, China has implemented sweeping new controls over refined silver products and silver processing capacity. This isn't about mine output. This isn't about ore sitting in the ground. This is about the refining and processing infrastructure that turns raw silver into the bars, ingots, and industrial grade material that the world actually uses. And here's the number that should make you sit up. China controls approximately 60% of global silver refining capacity. That's not mine production. That's the bottleneck. That's the choke point. And as of early 2026, Beijing has made it clear that refined silver is now a strategic resource subject to export licensing, quota systems, and in some interpretations, effective state control over output allocation. Let me be blunt about what this means. It means that even if silver is mined in Mexico, Peru, Australia, or Canada, if it gets sent to China for refining, which a massive percentage of global supply does, China now decides where that refined metal goes, when it goes, and at what price. This is not a mine nationalization. This is a processing nationalization. And if you understand supply chains, you know that controlling the refinery is more powerful than controlling the mine. Because you can have all the ore in the world, but if you can't turn it into a finished product, it doesn't matter. So I'm going to break down three things. First, what exactly China did, and why this is different from every other resource control move we've seen. Second, what this means for the physical silver market, for premiums, for mints, for dealers, and for anyone trying to buy or sell metal in the West. And third, what you should actually do if you're holding silver, if you're buying silver, or if you're trying to understand where this market goes next. This is going to be detailed. This is going to be technical. But if you care about silver, this might be the most important video you watch this year. Now, before we get into the mechanics, let me say something clearly. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is not doom porn. This is industrial policy. China has been telegraphing this move for over a year. They added silver to their critical minerals list in late 2025. They announced export controls on certain refined metals and rare earth processing in 2024 and 2025. They've been steadily consolidating domestic refining capacity under state-owned enterprises. The writing was on the wall. The problem is most people in the West were too busy watching the silver squeeze narrative or staring at COMEX inventory charts to notice what was happening 6,000 miles away in the actual supply chain. So let's start with what we can verify. Based on the most recent official statements and industry analyses, China's new framework does several things. 1. Refined silver products now require export licenses. That means even if a private company refines silver in China, they can't just ship it to New York or London or Zurich without government approval. 2. Export quotas are being discussed and in some cases implemented. That means there's a cap on how much refined silver can leave the country in a given period regardless of demand. 3. State-owned refiners are being given priority allocation of domestic ore and scrap. That means private refiners, including joint ventures with Western firms, are getting squeezed on feedstock. And 4. The language around ensuring domestic supply security and supporting strategic industries makes it clear that China's own industrial needs, solar panels, electronics, EVs, 5G infrastructure, come first. Exports come second, maybe. Now here's the part that most coverage is missing. China doesn't produce 60% of the world's silver from mines. They produce somewhere in the range of 12 to 15% of mined silver depending on the year. But they refine roughly 60% of the world's silver. Why? Because over the last 2 decades, China built the cheapest, most efficient, highest capacity refining infrastructure on the planet. Western refiners couldn't compete on cost. So mine output from Latin America, from Asia, from other regions started getting shipped to China for processing. It made economic sense. Shipping costs were low. Chinese refiners could do it faster and cheaper. And then the refined metal would get shipped back out to mints, manufacturers, and dealers around the world. That worked great in a globalized, low-friction trade environment. It stops working the second China decides that refining capacity is a strategic asset and starts picking winners and losers. Let me use an analogy. Imagine you own an apple orchard. You grow apples. But you don't own a juicing facility. So you ship your apples to the only major juicing plant in the region, and they turn your apples into juice, and then you sell the juice. One day the juicing plant says, "We're keeping half the juice for ourselves, and the other half you need a license to buy, and we're going to prioritize our own customers." You still own the apples. You can still grow apples. But without access to the juicer, your apples are just apples. You can't get them to market in the form your customers want. That's what's happening with silver. Mines outside China can keep producing. But if they lose access to Chinese refining, they have a problem. They either need to find alternative refining capacity, which is limited and expensive, or they need to build new capacity, which takes years and massive capital. Now let's talk about the numbers, because this is where it gets real. Global silver supply is around 1 billion ounces per year when you include mine production and recycling. Of that, roughly 800 to 900 million ounces come from mining. China's share of mine production is about 110 to 130 million ounces depending on the year. But China's share of refining is north of 600 million ounces. That's the gap. That's the leverage. And it's not just about volume, it's about speed and quality. Chinese refiners can process material faster and to tighter specs than most Western facilities. When you're a mint trying to strike coins or a manufacturer trying to make solar panels, you need refined silver that meets specific purity standards. You can't just use raw ore. You need refined metal. And if the refiners are in China and China is restricting exports, you're in trouble. So what does this actually mean for the market? Let's walk through the implications step by step. First implication: premiums are going to rise and stay elevated. We've already seen this start to happen. Physical premiums on silver products in North America and Europe have been elevated for months. As of early February 2026, premiums on Silver Eagles, Maples, Britannias, and even generic rounds are running anywhere from $8 to $15 over spot depending on the product and the region. Some dealers are reporting premiums as high as $20 over spot for certain sizes and delivery windows. Why? Because the flow of refined silver from China to Western mints is slowing. Mints are having to source material from non-Chinese refiners, and there aren't that many. The ones that exist are running at or near capacity. And capacity doesn't expand overnight. You can't just build a new refinery in 6 months. It takes years. Permits, environmental reviews, capital, equipment, skilled labor. So in the short to medium term, Western mints are scrambling. And when supply is tight, premiums go up. Second implication, we're going to see product availability issues. Not a silver shortage in the sense that silver disappears from the earth, but a refined product shortage. Mints might have to extend delivery times. Dealers might run low on certain popular items. You might see situations where generic bars are available, but government coins are backordered for weeks. This already happened in late 2020 and 2021 during the first Reddit silver squeeze attempt. Demand spiked, mints couldn't keep up, premiums exploded, and you had people paying $35 or $40 for an ounce of silver when spot was at $25. The difference this time is the bottleneck isn't just a temporary demand surge. It's a structural supply chain disruption. And structural problems don't resolve quickly. Third implication, spot price and physical price are going to disconnect even more. Spot silver, the price you see on the screen, is set in the paper futures market, COMEX, London, other exchanges. That price reflects leverage, positioning, hedging, speculation, and financial flows. Physical silver, the metal you can actually hold, is priced at spot plus a premium. That premium reflects real-world supply and demand at the retail and wholesale level. When the two prices move in sync, the market is functioning normally. When they diverge, something is broken, and what China just did is going to break that linkage further. Spot might stay range-bound or even fall if financial conditions tighten and paper traders sell. But physical premiums could keep rising because the actual metal is harder to get. If you're a physical holder, that's frustrating because your metal isn't worth what the premium suggests unless you're actually selling. But if you're a buyer, it means the screen price is increasingly irrelevant. You're paying spot plus 12, spot plus 15, maybe spot plus 20, and that's the real cost. Fourth implication, industrial users are going to get squeezed. Solar panel manufacturers, electronics companies, medical device makers, anyone who needs refined silver as an input is going to face higher costs and longer lead times. And that has ripple effects. If a solar company can't get silver at a reasonable price, they either eat the cost, pass it on to customers, or slow down production. If they slow down production, that impacts the broader energy transition narrative. If they pass on costs, solar installations get more expensive and adoption slows. This is the hidden second-order effect of China's move. It's not just about investors and coin collectors. It's about the industrial economy. Fifth implication, this might finally force Western governments to care about refining capacity. The U.S., Canada, Europe, they all talk about critical minerals and supply chain security, but talk is cheap. Building refineries is expensive. What China just did is a wake-up call. If you're a Western government and you just realize that 60% of your silver refining happens in a country that's increasingly adversarial on trade, you have a problem. And the solution is to build domestic refining capacity. But that takes time, capital, and political will. In the meantime, you're stuck. And that's leverage. That's exactly why China did this. Not to hurt the West. To control a strategic input and extract concessions on other issues. Silver is a pawn in a much bigger game. Now let's talk about why this is different from other resource moves. A lot of people are going to compare this to OPEC and oil, or to China's previous rare earth controls. Those comparisons make sense, but they're incomplete. When OPEC restricts oil output, they're controlling the raw resource at the wellhead. the stuff coming out of the ground. But oil refining capacity is distributed globally. The US, Europe, Asia, the Middle East all have major refining hubs. So even if OPEC cuts production, the refining bottleneck isn't as severe. With silver, it's the opposite. The mines are distributed globally. Mexico, Peru, China, Australia, Chile, Poland, the US, lots of countries produce silver, but the refining is concentrated. And the concentration is in China. So China doesn't need to control the mines. They control the refineries, and that's checkmate. Rare earths are a closer comparison. China controls a huge percentage of rare earth refining and processing, not just mining. And they've used that leverage before, most notably in 2010 when they restricted exports to Japan during a territorial dispute. Prices spiked. Western countries panicked. And eventually some new supply came online in other regions, but it took years and it's still not enough to break China's dominance. Silver is following the same playbook. The difference is silver has broader applications. Rare earths go into very specific high-tech applications. Silver goes into solar panels, electronics, medical equipment, coins, jewelry, industrial catalysts, you name it. So the impact is wider. And the potential for this to become a geopolitical bargaining chip is higher. Here's another angle most people are missing. Why now? Why did China do this in early 2026? I'll give you my read. 1. Domestic demand. China is going all in on solar energy, EV infrastructure, and advanced manufacturing. All of those things use silver. By restricting exports, they ensure domestic industries have first access to supply. 2. Trade leverage. U.S.-China relations are still tense. Tariffs, tech restrictions, semiconductor controls, all of that is ongoing. Silver refining is a card China can play. If the West wants refined silver, they need to negotiate. 3. De-dollarization and resource nationalism. China, Russia, and other BRICS countries are pushing to reduce dependence on the dollar and Western financial systems. Controlling physical commodities, especially ones critical to industrial production, is part of that strategy. And 4. Market timing. Silver prices ran up hard in late 2025 and early 2026. That run-up increased global attention on silver. By moving now, China locks in control before Western countries wake up and start building competing refining capacity. So what should you actually do with this information? Let's get practical. If you're holding physical silver right now, do nothing. Sit tight. The fact that refining is getting harder means the physical metal you already own is becoming more valuable in relative terms. The premium you paid 6 months ago or a year ago is now looking smarter. Don't panic sell because spot price is volatile. Physical is physical. The whole point of owning it is that it's not subject to the same financial engineering as paper. If anything, this news is bullish for physical holders over the medium to long term. If you're thinking about buying physical silver, here's what I'd do. 1. Expect to pay higher premiums and accept that as the new normal. Don't wait for premiums to come back down to 2019 levels. They might not. 2. Prioritize availability over price. If you find a dealer with product in stock at a halfway reasonable premium, buy it. Don't hold out for the perfect price and miss the window. 3. Consider buying larger bars instead of coins if premium is your main concern. A 100-ounce bar carries a lower premium per ounce than a 1-ounce coin. If you're accumulating and you're not worried about small denomination liquidity, bars make sense. 4. Verify your dealer's supply chain. Ask them where their metal is coming from. If they're sourcing from mints that rely on Chinese refined silver, expect delays. If they're sourcing from mints that use non-Chinese refiners, that's a better bet. 5. Be patient. If premiums spike to $20 or $25 over spot, that might be a sign to wait. But if premiums are in the 10 to 15 range, that's probably the new baseline. If you're holding paper silver, SLV, SLV, futures, options, here's my take. Paper doesn't benefit from this story the same way physical does. Paper silver tracks spot price, and spot price is set in a financial market that doesn't care about refining bottlenecks. Spot cares about dollar strength, real rates, risk sentiment, positioning. So if you're in paper, you're making a different bet. You're betting on financial conditions and momentum. That's fine, but understand the distinction. If your thesis is that refining bottlenecks are going to squeeze the physical market, then you need to own physical, not paper. If your thesis is that this news will create hype and momentum and spot price will rip higher, then paper can capture that move. But paper won't capture the premium expansion. That's a physical-only phenomenon. If you're an industrial user or you work in manufacturing, this is a massive red flag. If your company uses refined silver and you're not locked into long-term supply contracts, you need to talk to procurement now. Like this week. Get ahead of this. Lock in supply. Even if it means paying higher prices or committing to volume, it's better than not being able to get material at any price. I've seen this movie before with other commodities. The companies that wake up early and secure supply survive. The companies that wait and hope it blows over get crushed. Now let's talk about the uncomfortable scenarios. What if this gets worse? What if China doesn't just restrict exports, but actually cuts them off entirely for a period? What does that look like? Here's the chain of events. Western mints run out of feedstock within weeks. Coin and bar production halts or slows to a trickle. Premiums explode to $30, $40, $50 over spot or higher. Some dealers stop selling entirely because they can't source inventory. Industrial users start hoarding and bidding up price. Spot price might actually fall or stay flat because the paper market is disconnected and traders don't care about physical dynamics until it's too late. You'd have a true two-tier market. Paper silver trading at $75 or $80. Physical silver, if you can find it, trading at $120 or $130. That would be chaos. And I'm not saying that's the base case. I'm saying it's within the range of possible outcomes. And if you're not mentally prepared for that kind of dislocation, you need to think through how you'd react. On the flip side, what if this is overblown? What if China's restrictions are more symbolic than real and metal keeps flowing? Here's that scenario. China issues export licenses freely. Quotas are high enough that they don't bind. Refined silver continues to move from Chinese refiners to Western mints at close to historical volumes. Premiums stay elevated but don't explode. The market adjusts. Mints diversify their supply sources over time. New refining capacity comes online in North America and Europe over the next 2 to 3 years. And we look back in 2028 and say, yeah, that was a speed bump, but it didn't break anything. That's possible too. And if that happens, physical holders are fine. You're not worse off. You just didn't get the spike you might have hoped for. Here's my base case. The truth is somewhere in the middle. China will restrict exports, but not cut them off entirely. They'll use licensing and quotas to control the flow and extract leverage on other trade and policy issues. Western mints will struggle in the near term. Premiums will stay elevated, probably in the $10 to $20 range for popular products. Some products will be harder to get than others. Industrial users will face higher costs and longer lead times. Over the next 2 to 3 years, some new refining capacity will come online in the West, but not enough to fully replace China. And the silver market will operate in a higher friction, higher premium, more fragmented state than it did in the 2010s. That's not catastrophic. But it's not business as usual either. Now let's connect this to the bigger picture. What does this mean for the silver bull case? Does it strengthen it or weaken it? In my view, it strengthens the physical case and complicates the paper case. If you believe silver is going higher because of supply deficits, industrial demand, and monetary concerns, then China's move accelerates the supply deficit story. Less refined silver flowing to the West means tighter physical markets, higher premiums, and more incentive for long-term holders to hang on. But it also means more volatility, more uncertainty, and more potential for short-term dislocations that shake out weak hands. If you're leveraged or trading on margin or trying to flip for quick gains, this environment is dangerous. If you're a long-term physical accumulator who understands that you're holding a strategic industrial metal with monetary properties, this is confirmation of your thesis. Let me also say something about the gold-silver ratio, because I know people are going to ask. As of this recording, the gold-silver ratio is hovering in the low 60s. That means it takes about 62 or 63 ounces of silver to buy 1 ounce of gold. Historically, that ratio has ranged anywhere from 40 to 100 depending on the decade and the macro environment. Some people use the ratio as a timing tool. When the ratio is high, meaning silver is cheap relative to gold, they buy silver. When the ratio is low, meaning silver is expensive relative to gold, they swap into gold. Here's my take. China's refining move is more bullish for silver than for gold because silver has industrial applications and refining bottlenecks. Gold doesn't. Gold refining is distributed. Gold doesn't go into solar panels. So if you're looking at the ratio and thinking, should I be in silver or gold, this news tilts the scales towards silver over the medium term. But, and this is important, silver is also more volatile. So if risk conditions deteriorate and we get a credit event or a deflationary scare, silver will fall harder than gold in the short term. The ratio could spike to 80 or 90 before it compresses. So don't use the ratio as a one-way signal. Use it as a compass, not a map. All right, let's wrap this up with action steps. Here's what I want you to do. 1. If you're holding physical, inventory what you have. Know your cost basis. Know your premiums. Write it down. 2. If you're buying, set a plan. Decide how much you want to allocate, over what time frame, and at what premium levels. Don't chase. Don't FOMO. Scale in. 3. If you're in paper, ask yourself if that's really the exposure you want given this news. If the answer is yes because you're trading momentum, fine. If the answer is no because you want physical exposure, make the swap. 4. If you're an industrial user, talk to your supply chain team this week. Don't wait. 5. Watch the signals. Track premiums from multiple dealers. Track mint delivery times. Track industrial silver prices in spot markets outside the futures exchanges. Those are the tells. And here's the big question I want you to answer in the comments. Knowing what you know now, would you rather own physical silver with a $15 premium or paper silver at spot with no premium? Tell me which one and why, because your answer will tell me whether you understand what just happened. If you got value from this breakdown, subscribe and comment FinTalk OG so I know you're serious about staying ahead of the curve. And share this with someone who's holding silver or thinking about it, because this is the kind of information that doesn't make it to CNBC until it's already priced in. One last thing. This video is educational. It's my analysis and my opinions based on publicly available information and industry reports. I could be wrong. I don't have a crystal ball. Do your own homework. Talk to people who know your situation and understand that commodity markets are volatile and this situation is developing in real time. If you can't handle uncertainty, don't play in this space. All right, stay sharp and I'll see you in the next one.